Imagine standing at the altar, surrounded by hundreds of people, dressed in white, heart full of love, and the person you trusted most walks away. The music stops. The whispers begin. Every eye in the room turns toward you. Your dreams shatter, and all you can hear is the echo of your own heartbeat. That's where her story begins. This is not just a story about heartbreak. It's about the moment the world turns its back on you, and a single stranger steps forward to remind you that you still matter. It's about losing everything you thought you needed, only to find everything you truly deserved. Because sometimes life has to break you before it can rebuild you. Sometimes the person who saves you isn't there to replace your pain, but to teach you that you were never broken to begin with. If you've ever felt abandoned, unseen, or unloved, this story is for you. As you listen, I want you to imagine that you are the one standing there, in that dress, in that silence, holding on to your last bit of hope. Because what happens next will remind you that miracles don't always arrive with flowers. Sometimes they arrive holding an umbrella. Before we begin, I want to ask you something important. Take a deep breath and think about how many people right now feel forgotten, rejected, or alone. You can help them simply by sharing this story. Leave a comment saying where you are watching from, because your words might reach someone who needs this message today. Let's show the world that kindness still exists, that hope can bloom again, and that no one is truly alone. So if you believe that pain can become purpose, stay until the end, because this story will touch your soul and maybe, just maybe, change the way you see love, loss, and second chances. Now, let's begin. The day everything fell apart. It was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. The church smelled of white roses, the candles were lit, and soft music echoed through the hall. Everyone stood when Lily walked down the aisle. She looked like a dream, not because of her expensive dress, but because of the hope in her eyes. Her heart beat fast, not with fear, but with love. She had waited years for this moment. She believed love was stronger than money, fame, or anything else. But life was about to teach her something she would never forget. Lily reached the altar, smiling at everyone. Her fiancé, Thomas, stood there, in his perfectly tailored suit. He looked nervous, but she thought it was just the emotion of the day. When the priest asked him to take her hand, Thomas hesitated. A strange silence filled the air. People began to whisper. Lily tried to smile. "Thomas?" she whispered, her voice trembling. Thomas took a deep breath. I can't do this." The room froze. For a moment, no one moved. The priest blinked in confusion. "Son? What do you mean?" Thomas stepped back. "I'm sorry, Lily. I can't marry you." Her heart stopped. The crowd gasped. Her father took a step forward. Her mother covered her mouth. "Thomas, what are you saying?" Lily cried, her voice cracking. But Thomas turned and walked away, leaving her standing alone in front of everyone. The music stopped. The whispers turned into judgment. Someone laughed quietly in the back row. It felt like knives stabbing her from every direction. Her hands shook. Her eyes filled with tears. "Please, Thomas, don't do this." But the church doors closed behind him. He was gone. Her father ran to her, holding her shoulders. "Sweetheart, it's okay. It's okay." But nothing felt okay. Her dress felt heavy. Her dreams shattered like glass on the floor. The world spun. Cameras flashed. The guests whispered words like, "Shame, poor girl," and he must have found someone better. Hours later, Lily sat alone on the church steps, still wearing her wedding gown. The sky turned gray. Rain started to fall softly. The makeup on her face mixed with tears. She held her bouquet, tight as if it could hold her together. Why? she whispered to herself. Why wasn't I enough? People passed by, pretending not to see her. In that moment, she learned how cold the world could be. When you fall, most people just watch. Only a few stopped to help. A car stopped nearby. A man stepped out. Tall, calm, and wearing a simple black coat. He didn't look like a guest. He walked up slowly, holding an umbrella over her head. You'll get sick if you stay like this, he said gently. She looked up, her voice weak. Who are you? Just someone who doesn't like seeing a good person suffer, he replied. Lily gave a small, bitter laugh. You don't even know me. The man smiled. Maybe not, but I know pain when I see it. He took off his coat and gently placed it over her shoulders. What he did says nothing about your worth. His calmness felt strange, almost too kind. Thank you, she said, still trembling. But I'm fine. Please, you don't have to. I know, he interrupted softly, but I want to. For the first time that day, she felt seen. Not as a broken bride, not as a victim, but as a human being. He offered his hand. Let me take you somewhere warm. She hesitated. I can't just go with a stranger. He nodded. You're right. I'm Ethan. Lily, she said quietly. He smiled. Then we're not strangers anymore. They walked to his car. It wasn't luxurious, just clean and simple. The seats smelled like coffee and rain. Ethan handed her a tissue and drove in silence, respecting her pain. After a few minutes, he said, You know, sometimes losing what we thought we wanted is how life gives us what we truly need. Lily didn't reply. Her eyes looked out the window, watching the city blur through her tears. I don't even know who I am without him, she whispered. You'll find out, Ethan said. And when you do, you'll thank him for leaving. His words sounded impossible, but something about his tone made her believe them. Just a little. When they arrived at a small cafe, he opened the door for her. The warmth inside felt like another world compared to the storm outside. The waitress smiled kindly, serving them hot tea. Lily sat silently, staring at the steam rising from her cup. Ethan looked at her. Do you believe in second chances? She shrugged. Not anymore. Then maybe, he said softly. Today's your first. That sentence stayed in her heart long after he drove her home. She didn't know then that this stranger would change her life, not because he was rich or powerful, but because he would show her what real value means. That night, as she stood by the window watching the rain, she whispered, Maybe I still have a future, somewhere deep inside. Small spark of hope returned. She didn't know it yet, but her story was only beginning, and soon the world would know her name for a very different reason. The stranger who stayed. Days passed, but the world still looked gray to Lily. The news of her failed wedding spread quickly. People whispered at her workplace, and neighbors looked at her with pity. Every morning, she forced herself to get out of bed, but her heart felt empty. Her dreams, her plans, her love all gone in one afternoon. She stopped checking her phone. Every message from friends started with, I'm so sorry, but none of them really understood. They weren't the ones left standing alone in front of a crowd. They weren't the ones who gave everything to someone who walked away without looking back. Then one morning, as she sat by the window drinking coffee, her phone buzzed. A message appeared. This is Ethan. I hope you're doing okay. She stared at it for a long time. He was the man from the church, the stranger who had offered her kindness when no one else did. She hesitated before typing back, I'm fine, just trying to move on. Seconds later, another message came. If trying isn't working, maybe doing something different. Will? She smiled for the first time in days. Like what? she replied. Come to the cafe again. Sometimes new beginnings start with a cup of coffee. Lily hesitated, then decided to go. She wore a simple white shirt and jeans, nothing like the lace and silk from her wedding day. When she entered the cafe, Ethan was already there, reading a book. He looked up and smiled warmly. I was hoping you'd come. Why? She asked, sitting down. Because people who have been through storms deserve a little sunshine. She laughed softly. You talk like a poet. Only when the audience deserves it, he replied. As they talked, she found herself relaxing. His presence was calm, almost grounding. He didn't ask about Thomas, didn't mention the wedding. Instead, he asked about her dreams, her childhood, and what she wanted to do with her life now. It had been so long since someone asked her that. I always wanted to open my own flower shop, she admitted, but I never had the money. Thomas said it was silly. Ethan leaned forward. Then Thomas was wrong. Flowers are hope in color form, and the world always needs more hope. She smiled. You really think so? I know so, he said, his voice steady. The question is, do you? Lily looked down at her hands. I used to. Then start again, he said simply. They spent hours talking. When she finally stood to leave, she felt lighter. As she walked out, Ethan said, Lily, remember this. Love is beautiful, but self-respect is priceless. Those words echoed in her mind all night. For the first time since the wedding, she started making plans, not about love, but about her future. She began researching small business loans, reading about entrepreneurship, and sketching flower arrangements in her notebook. The pain was still there, but now it had company, determination. Weeks turned into months. Lily found a small shop for rent in the corner of a quiet street. It wasn't fancy, but it had big windows and lots of light. She named it Second Bloom. It felt symbolic, just like her life, starting over. The first day she opened, no one came. She stood behind the counter, staring at the empty room. The smell of fresh roses filled the air, but silence surrounded her. Doubt crept in. Maybe Thomas was right, she whispered. Maybe this was stupid. Then the door opened. Ethan walked in, holding a small plant in a pot. I brought you a gift, he said, smiling. It's a money tree, for good luck. Lily laughed. You and your metaphors. Maybe, he said, placing it on the counter. But here's one more. Don't judge success on how many people show up on day one. Judge it on whether you showed up for yourself. She looked at him, eyes softening. You always know what to say, don't you? I just tell the truth, he said. And the truth is, you're stronger than you think. Over the next few weeks, Ethan stopped by often. Sometimes he brought coffee, sometimes customers, sometimes just silence. They never labeled what they were, but a quiet bond grew between them. Lily started smiling again, laughing again, living again. One evening, as they were closing the shop, she said, You never told me what you do for a living. Ethan smiled mysteriously. Let's just say I work with investments. She rolled her eyes playfully. That's vague. He shrugged. You'll understand someday. Then he walked out into the cool evening air, leaving her with more questions than answers. Later that night, Lily received a call from an unknown number. It was Thomas. His voice sounded nervous. Lily, I made a mistake. I shouldn't have left you. She froze. What do? You want Thomas? I want you back. I was scared, okay? I thought marrying you would trap me, but now I realize I lost the best thing in my life. Tears filled her eyes, but not from sadness, this time from clarity. Thomas, she said quietly, you didn't lose me. You let me go, and I'm finally learning who I am without you. Please, Lily, she hung up. Then she looked at her shop, her flowers, and the little money tree on the counter. For the first time, she felt proud. She whispered, "Thank you, Ethan." But what she didn't know was that Ethan's investments were far more than financial. He had been watching from afar, helping her in quiet ways, paying the first month's rent of her shop anonymously, sending customers through referrals, and believing in her when no one else did. And soon, the world would find out who Ethan really was. The return of the past. Months passed, and Lily's shop began to thrive. People loved her flowers, the colors, the scents, the warmth that filled the room whenever someone walked in. She had become a quiet inspiration in the town. Second Bloom was more than a flower shop. It was a symbol of resilience. Couples came to buy bouquets for weddings, families for celebrations, and lonely souls for hope. Lily greeted everyone with the same gentle smile, unaware that her story was spreading far beyond her small street. Ethan still visited from time to time. Sometimes he brought coffee. Other times he simply stood by the window, watching her work. They didn't talk about the past anymore. Their conversations were filled with laughter, future dreams, and ideas. Lily began to look forward to his visits more than she wanted to admit. One sunny afternoon, a woman entered the shop. She wore designer clothes, sunglasses that hid her eyes, and a perfume that filled the room. "Are you Lily?" she asked. "Yes," Lily said cautiously. "How can I help you?" The woman smiled. "I'm Rebecca, Thomas's fiancée." The words hit Lily like a sudden wind. "Fiancée?" She repeated, trying to keep her voice steady. Rebecca nodded proudly. "He told me about you. I must say, brave of you to still live here after what happened." Lily felt her chest tighten. "What do you want?" Rebecca looked around. "Thomas said you were doing fine. I just wanted to see for myself. It's cute, this little shop. Must be hard work though, right? Flowers don't make much money." Lily's hands trembled slightly as she arranged the roses. "I manage," Rebecca smirked. "Well, if you ever need help, I'm sure Thomas could recommend someone who knows business." Lily looked her straight in the eyes. "Thank you, but I already know someone who believes in me." Rebecca raised an eyebrow. "Oh, a new boyfriend?" "Something like that," Lily said with quiet strength. "Someone who doesn't measure worth by money or status," Rebecca scoffed. "Good luck with that." She turned and walked out, leaving a trail of expensive perfume and arrogance behind. Lily stood still for a moment, breathing deeply. Then she picked up her phone and sent a message to Ethan. "Do you still believe people can rise again after being crushed?" He replied within seconds. "Every day? Why?" "Because I think I just met my test." That evening, Ethan arrived at the shop. "Rough day?" he asked gently. Lily nodded. Thomas's fiancée came by. She wanted to make sure I'm small enough for her to feel big. Ethan smiled softly. "Then don't fight her. Just grow higher. Shadows can't touch the sunlight." Lily smiled weakly. "You always know the right metaphor." He shrugged. "Pain teaches poetry." They shared quiet laughter, but deep down, Lily could feel something building inside her, a fire she hadn't felt in years. She didn't want revenge. She wanted redemption. Not to prove them wrong, but to prove herself right. Weeks later, she received an invitation in the mail. It was for Thomas and Rebecca's wedding. Her hands shook as she held the golden envelope. Inside, a note read, "We'd love for you to see how happy we are now." It wasn't kindness, it was mockery. Lily stared at the invitation for a long time, then threw it in the trash. But Ethan noticed the sadness in her eyes the next day. "You got something on your mind," he said. She sighed. "An invitation. From Thomas." Ethan frowned. "Do you plan to go?" "I don't know," she said. "Part of me wants to." To show him I'm fine. To show him I survived. Ethan looked at her gently. If you go, go for yourself. Not to prove anything to him. But if you go, walk in like you own the room because you do. You own your story now. His words echoed in her mind for days. Finally, she decided. She would go. Not in bitterness, but in peace. She picked out a simple yet elegant dress, a deep blue color that made her eyes stand out. She styled her hair neatly and wore no diamonds, only confidence. When she entered the grand hotel where the wedding was held, people turned to look at her. Some whispered, some smiled awkwardly. Thomas froze when he saw her. For a moment, he couldn't move. Lily? He stammered. She smiled softly. Congratulations, Thomas. Rebecca appeared beside him, holding his arm tightly. Lily, you came. That's unexpected. I wanted to wish you both well, Lily said calmly. Truly. Her tone was so composed that it made Rebecca uncomfortable. Thomas couldn't take his eyes off her. She looked radiant, strong, graceful, untouchable. He realized too late what he had lost. As the ceremony began, Lily sat quietly near the back. She didn't cry. She didn't tremble. She simply watched, feeling a strange mix of sadness and freedom. When it ended, she stood up to leave. But just as she reached the door, she heard someone call her name. Lily! It was Ethan. She turned, surprised. He was dressed in a dark suit, more formal than she had ever seen him. What are you doing here? She asked. I was invited, he said simply. Her eyes widened. Invited? By whom? He smiled faintly. The groom's business partner. Before she could speak, Thomas walked up, pale and confused. You know him? Ethan extended his hand calmly. We've met. I'm Ethan Ward. Thomas blinked. Ethan Ward? The investor from Sterling Enterprises? Ethan nodded. That's me. A murmur spread through the crowd. Thomas swallowed hard. You're the one who invested in your company? Yes, Ethan interrupted. Softly. But I'm also the man who stood beside the woman you left at the altar. The silence in the room was deafening. Rebecca's smile vanished. Cameras turned. Guests whispered. Lily stood frozen, her heart racing. Ethan looked at Thomas. I once believed in your company, but now I invest in people with integrity, with heart, with courage. People like her. Then he turned to Lily and said gently, May I take your hand again, Miss Bloom? The room gasped. Lily's eyes filled with tears, not of pain this time, but of awe. Slowly, she reached out her hand. Ethan smiled. Because I meant what I said that day. You deserve someone who chooses you, not because of appearances, but because of soul. The crowd applauded softly. Thomas lowered his head in shame. Rebecca turned away. Lily whispered, Ethan, why didn't you tell me? He smiled. Because I wanted you to see your own worth first. That moment changed everything. The power of dignity. The night after the wedding became the talk of the entire city. Every guest had witnessed the moment when Ethan revealed his identity, not as a simple stranger, but as one of the most respected investors in the country. The man who had once stood quietly under the rain was now recognized as a financial genius. And the woman everyone pitied months ago had become the symbol of quiet strength. The internet exploded with photos and stories. The bride who rose again became a trending topic. But for Lily, it wasn't fame she felt. It was peace. She sat in her shop. The next morning, sunlight shining through the glass, touching every flower with gold. Ethan entered quietly, holding 2 cups of coffee. You handled yourself perfectly yesterday, he said. Lily smiled softly. I didn't plan to make headlines. Sometimes dignity makes more noise than anger ever could. He replied, handing her the coffee. She took a sip and looked at him. Everyone's talking about you, about us. He shrugged. Let them. The world needs stories that remind people of what really matters. She tilted her head. And what's that? Grace, he said simply. Even when the world expects you to break. Lily looked down, remembering the fear she had once felt on that church floor. Now it felt like a different lifetime. You know, Ethan, when you showed up that day, I thought you were just being kind. I didn't know you'd turn my entire life around. Ethan smiled faintly. You did that? Yourself. I just gave you a push. As they talked, a customer entered the shop, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes. She looked nervous. Excuse me, she said softly. I saw your story online. My husband left me last year. I lost everything. But seeing you, it made me think maybe I can start again. Lily's heart warmed. Of course you can. Sit down. She handed the woman a small white rose. This is for courage. The woman smiled through tears. Thank you. After she left, Ethan turned to Lily. You see, you're already changing lives. Lily laughed gently. One rose at a time. Days turned into weeks, and Second Bloom became more than a flower shop. It became a gathering place for people who had been hurt but wanted to heal. Lily started a community program called New Roots, where she taught small business skills and emotional resilience to women who had faced betrayal or loss. Her story inspired sponsors and organizations. Soon she was being invited to speak at events about dignity, entrepreneurship, and emotional recovery. At one event, she stood in front of a crowd of 200 people. Her voice trembled slightly at first. I used to think being left at the altar was the worst thing that could happen to me, she said. But now I know it was the best. Because sometimes life breaks you open just to show you what was always inside. The crowd erupted in applause. Cameras flashed, but Lily's eyes found Ethan standing quietly in the back of the hall. He didn't wave. He just smiled, proud. After the event, a journalist approached her. Miss Bloom, you've become a symbol of self-worth. What's your secret? Lily thought for a moment. Don't chase people who walk away. Chase the version of yourself that's still waiting to be discovered. The journalist nodded, inspired. Later that night, Ethan drove her home. The city lights reflected on the car window, soft and golden. You know, he said, you're teaching things people spend years trying to learn. She laughed. Like what? That money can buy comfort, but only character builds peace. Lily looked at him for a long moment. You sound like someone who's been through his own heartbreak. He smiled sadly. Maybe I have. For the first time, she saw something in his eyes, loneliness. A quiet kind of pain. Tell me about it, she said gently. Ethan sighed. Years ago, I was engaged too. She left when she found out I wasn't as rich as she thought. I built my empire after that, not to get revenge, but to prove to myself that my value wasn't tied to anyone's approval. Lily nodded slowly. So we're both products of rejection. He chuckled. You could say that. Maybe rejection is life's way of clearing the path for better company. They both laughed softly. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was peaceful. As they stopped in front of her apartment, Ethan turned to her. Lily, there's something else I want to tell you. She looked at him curiously. What is it? I didn't just invest in your shop. I bought the entire building. But before you get mad, hear me out. I wanted to make sure no one could ever take this place away from you. Lily's mouth opened slightly in shock. Ethan, why would you do that? He looked straight into her eyes. Because this shop isn't just business. It's your heart, and I don't want anyone to break it again. Her eyes filled with tears. Ethan, I don't know what to say. He smiled. Just promise me you'll keep blooming. She nodded slowly. I will. That night, Lily sat alone in her room, thinking about everything she had been through, the humiliation, the loss, the kindness of a stranger, the rediscovery of her own power. She realized she didn't need saving. She needed reminding. And Ethan had done exactly that. But the story wasn't over yet. Success attracts attention, and sometimes the wrong kind. Because while Lily was rising, someone from Thomas's circle was planning something darker. Jealousy had begun to grow, and soon it would test everything she had built. In the silence of her shop that night, as the last candle flickered out, Lily whispered to herself, no matter what comes next, I won't go back to who I was. Her second bloom was just beginning to face the storm again, the shadows behind success. The next few months were filled with light and laughter. Second bloom expanded into 2 more branches. Lily had built something real, something meaningful. She employed women who once believed their lives were over. She gave them a reason to smile again. Each morning, when she opened the door to her shop, the scent of fresh lily reminded her that life had forgiven her because she had forgiven herself. But success comes with its own kind of danger. One afternoon, a man in a gray suit entered the shop. He didn't smile. Miss Bloom? He asked coldly. Yes, Lily said carefully. Can I help you? I'm here from the bank, he replied, showing her a document. There's a legal issue regarding your property ownership. It seems your building is being challenged by a former stakeholder. Lily's heart dropped. What? That's impossible. Ethan owns the building. The man nodded. Yes, but a complaint has been filed under his company's name, not by him, but by someone who claims to be a partner, a man named Thomas Hill. Lily froze. Thomas? Yes, he's demanding a review of the purchase and alleging financial manipulation. She felt the ground slip beneath her feet. He's lying. The man sighed. You'll need to provide documents proving your lease and ownership security. After he left, Lily sat at her counter, her hands trembling. She hadn't seen or heard from Thomas since the wedding. Now, he was trying to destroy the one thing she had left. Her phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. I heard about the claim. Don't panic. I'm handling it. Hours later, Ethan arrived at her shop. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharp. He's desperate, he said. After the wedding, his business started to fall apart. He lost investors. When people found out what he did to you, now he's trying to ruin you to make himself feel powerful again. Lily shook her head, fighting tears. Why can't he just let me live? Because people who build their worth on control can't stand seeing others free, Ethan replied softly. Days turned into a blur of lawyers, paperwork, and stress. Lily tried to stay strong for her employees, but inside she was terrified. Every night she prayed, not for revenge, but for peace. One night, Ethan found her sitting in the dark shop. You haven't gone home, he said gently. I can't sleep, she whispered. What if I lose everything again? He sat beside her. You won't. You've already won in the only way that matters. She looked at him, tears glistening. How? Because you've already proven that even if they take everything you own, they can't touch who you are. She leaned against him quietly. I wish I had your strength. He smiled softly. You do. You just don't always see it. The next morning, Ethan met with his legal team. The case was strong. Thomas had forged documents and made false claims, but it would take time to clear. Meanwhile, rumors spread online. Flower shop queen faces. Lawsuit. Some people doubted her. Others defended her. Lily learned again how quickly the world loves to watch a fall. Still, she showed up to work every day. She watered her plants, smiled at her customers, and refused to break. Her employees followed her lead. "We believe in you, Miss Bloom," one sighed. "You taught us not to give up." That sentence kept her going. Weeks later, the court hearing arrived. Lily stood beside Ethan, wearing a simple gray suit. Thomas sat across the room, arrogance fading from his eyes. When he saw her, he looked away. The judge entered, and the trial began. Evidence after evidence revealed Thomas's lies. Emails, forged signatures, and transactions all pointed to desperation. When the verdict came, it was clear. Thomas was guilty of fraud and ordered to pay restitution. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Lily closed her eyes, tears streaming down her face. Not from vengeance, from relief. After the hearing, Thomas walked up to her slowly. His voice was small. "Lily, I lost everything." She looked at him, her expression calm. "Then maybe now you'll learn what really matters." He swallowed. "You hate me, don't you?" Lily shook her head gently. "No, I pity you. You taught me what kind of person I never want to become." Then she turned and walked away, leaving him behind once more, this time forever. Outside, the cameras flashed, but Ethan shielded her from the crowd. "You did it," he said softly. "No," Lily replied. "We did it. You believed in me when I couldn't believe in myself." He smiled. "That's what real partnership means." She looked at him for a long moment, realizing how much he had come to mean to her. "Ethan, I don't know how to thank you." He chuckled. "Then don't. Just live fully." "That's all the thanks I need?" That evening, the shop was busier than ever. Strangers sent flowers to celebrate her victory. Her story was on every news channel, the woman who rose again. But Lily didn't care about fame. She stood in her shop, watching her team work, feeling proud and peaceful. Ethan came in late, holding a single white rose. "For the woman who turned pain into power," he said. She smiled softly. "You never stop with the symbolism." "Because it's all true," he said. "This rose has survived storms and still stands tall, just like you." Lily took the rose, her eyes glistening. "Thank you, Ethan." He took her hand gently. "You know, I told you once that losing what we think we want gives us what we truly need. I think I finally understand that now." She looked at him curiously. "And what do you need?" He smiled. "You." For the first time in years, Lily's heart didn't ache when someone said they needed her. This time, it felt right. She smiled back. "Then maybe, this time, I can say yes." The shop filled with quiet laughter and the scent of roses. Outside, the world kept talking, but inside, there was only peace, the kind of peace that comes when two broken souls finally find home in each other. And as the evening light painted gold across the petals, Lily whispered, "This is my second bloom." Lessons in the light. The following months felt like a dream. The storm had passed, and peace finally returned to Lily's life. Second Bloom had become a household name, a brand that stood for hope, recovery, and strength. People from all over the country ordered her flowers. Her story was featured in magazines and talk shows, but every time she was interviewed, she would say the same thing. "I'm not special. I just refuse to stay broken." Ethan remained by her side, not as a savior, but as a partner. Their relationship grew naturally, slow, honest, and full of respect. They didn't need grand gestures. A shared cup of coffee in the morning felt like everything they had ever wanted. One Sunday morning, as they sat on the porch of her small house, Ethan asked, "Do you ever think about that day? The wedding?" Lily looked at him, the corners of her lips lifting into a faint smile. "Sometimes, but it doesn't hurt anymore. It just feels like another life. I don't hate Thomas. I just hope he learns." Ethan nodded. You know, I think that's what makes you different. You didn't let bitterness win. She looked out at the garden, filled with bright colors. I guess I realized that revenge doesn't rebuild anything. Growth does. They sat in silence for a while. Birds chirped in the distance. Ethan finally said, "Do you ever think of expanding? Maybe starting a foundation for women like you once were?" Lily turned to him, her eyes bright. "Funny you say that. I've already started the process. I'm calling it the Second Bloom Foundation. We'll fund education and business programs for women who want a fresh start." Ethan smiled proudly. "Of course you are. That's who you are, the kind of person who turns pain into purpose." Lily laughed. "And you're the kind who turns purpose into a plan." They spent the next weeks building the foundation together. Ethan provided guidance and financial support, but Lily was the heart of it. She met women from all walks of life, mothers, widows, divorcees, and dreamers. Each of them carried pain, but also potential. "I can't fix your past," Lily told them in her first meeting, "but I can help you build something that makes your future worth waking up for." Tears flowed in the room. It was no longer just about flowers. It was about rebirth. Months later, the Second Bloom Foundation held its first big event, a charity gala. The hall was filled with guests, journalists, and business leaders. Ethan stood beside Lily, dressed in an elegant suit, his eyes full of pride. The lights dimmed, and Lily took the stage. She looked around the room, feeling her heart race. But this time, it wasn't fear. It was gratitude. "A few years ago," she began, "I was left standing alone at the altar. That moment broke me, but it also built me. I learned that when everything falls apart, it's not the end. It's the invitation to begin again." Applause filled the room. She continued, her voice steady. "We all face loss, love, money, dreams. But your value doesn't disappear when others fail to see it. Sometimes life has to take something from your hands so it can place something better in your heart." As she spoke, tears filled the eyes of many in the audience. Even Ethan looked moved, his usual calm breaking into a soft smile. When she finished, the room erupted in standing applause. People came forward to donate, to shake her hand, to thank her. It was overwhelming. But in the middle of the celebration, she saw a familiar face, Thomas, standing quietly near the exit. His expression wasn't angry or proud. It was humble. After the event ended, he approached her slowly. "Lily," he said quietly, "I didn't come to cause trouble. I came to say I'm sorry." She looked at him, her eyes calm. "You already did." He nodded. "I know I can't undo what I did. I wanted to tell you that seeing you like this, it made me realize how wrong I was. I thought success was money. You showed me it's peace." She smiled gently. "Then maybe we both learned something." He hesitated. "I heard about the foundation. If you ever need help, I'd like to contribute." Lily studied him for a moment, then said, "If it's from the heart, not the ego, I'll accept it." Thomas nodded. "It is." He handed her an envelope and walked away quietly. For the first time, she didn't feel anger or pain, just closure. Later that night, as the guests left and the hall grew quiet, Ethan found her sitting on the stage, holding the envelope. "You okay?" he asked. She smiled. "More than okay. I think I just closed my last chapter." Ethan sat beside her. "Funny you say that. I think this is the start of a new one." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small velvet box. Her breath caught as he opened it. A simple, elegant ring glimmered inside. "Lily Bloom," he said softly, "I don't want to replace your past. I want to build your future. Will you marry me?" For a moment, she couldn't speak. Her heart swelled with emotions she never thought she'd feel again. "Ethan," she whispered, tears falling. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." He slipped the ring onto her finger. "This time, I promise you one thing," he said. "No altar, no audience, no fear. Just us." She smiled through tears. "That's all I ever wanted." They sat there, under the soft glow of the empty hall, holding hands, surrounded by the flowers that symbolized everything she had fought for. Life had brought her full circle, from heartbreak to healing, from pain to peace, from being left behind to being loved again. And as the lights dimmed and music played softly in the distance, Lily whispered to herself, "The first bloom was love. The second bloom is wisdom." Her story had begun in tears, but it ended in light. Not because everything became perfect, but because she learned that true happiness isn't found in someone else's promise. It's built in the quiet courage to begin again. The wedding that healed. The day of Lily's wedding arrived with soft sunlight, and the smell of blooming jasmine in the air. This time, there were no crowds of strangers waiting to judge her. There were no flashing cameras, no gossip, no expectations. Just family, friends, and a quiet peace that filled every heart present. The ceremony was held in the garden behind her first flower shop, the same place where she had once cried alone. Now it was decorated with colors of hope. As Lily stood in front of the mirror, she touched the simple lace on her dress. It wasn't extravagant. It didn't need to be. Every stitch carried meaning. Her reflection showed not a bride seeking validation, but a woman who had rebuilt herself piece by piece. She smiled softly. "This is who I am," she whispered. Her best friend, Nora, entered the room holding a bouquet of white roses. "You ready?" she asked. Lily took a deep breath, more than ever. Outside, Ethan stood beneath an arch of white lilies and olive branches. He wore a dark suit, simple yet elegant. His eyes scanned the garden until they found her stepping through the gate. When she appeared, the guests stood in silence. The wind blew gently, carrying the scent of flowers through the air. As Lily walked down the aisle, memories flashed through her mind. The first wedding, the pain, the rain, the stranger with the umbrella. But instead of sadness, she felt gratitude. Every broken piece had led her here. When she reached Ethan, he smiled. "You're late," he joked softly. She laughed, tears glistening. "I wanted to make sure it was really happening this time." "It is," he said, taking her hands. "And it always will be." The ceremony was simple. The officiant spoke briefly about love, but everyone knew this wasn't an ordinary love story. It was a story of survival, patience, and healing. When Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger, he whispered, "No altars, no fear, no pretending, just truth." Lily smiled through her tears. "And peace." When they kissed, the crowd erupted in applause. It wasn't loud or wild. It was pure, full of emotion. Nora wiped her eyes. "She deserves this," she whispered. After the ceremony, the reception was held inside the garden, under strings of warm lights. The tables were covered with flowers from Lily's own shop, each one representing a lesson she had learned. White roses for forgiveness, yellow tulips for hope, and sunflowers for strength. Ethan raised his glass during a toast. "A few years ago, I saw a woman sitting in the rain, wearing a wedding dress, holding on to the last pieces of her dream. Today, she's not just wearing another dress. She's wearing courage, dignity, and grace. To my wife, the woman who taught me what real wealth is." Everyone stood, cheering. Lily blushed, tears falling. "Again, you're going to make me cry in every chapter of my life," she said, laughing. When the laughter faded, the band began to play a slow song. Ethan held her close. I remember the first time I saw you, he said softly. You looked so fragile. I was afraid if I spoke too loudly, you'd break. She rested her head against his chest. You didn't fix me. You reminded me I wasn't broken. They swayed under the lights as guests watched quietly, feeling the weight of their story. Somewhere in the crowd, Thomas stood at a distance. He hadn't told her he'd come. He just wanted to witness what true love looked like. When Ethan caught his eye, Thomas gave a respectful nod. Ethan returned it. There were no grudges left, only lessons. As the evening continued, a sudden breeze rustled through the garden, and the lights flickered. Lily laughed. Looks like the universe still likes to surprise me. Maybe. It's saying congratulations, Ethan replied. They sat for a while at their table, watching the people they loved laugh and dance. You know, Lily said, this feels unreal. Like I'm living in a dream I once thought was impossible. Ethan smiled. That's the best kind of reality, the one you fought. F.O. Later in the evening, as the guests began to leave, Lily and Ethan stayed behind. The music faded, and the lights grew softer. She looked around at the flowers, the candles, the memories, and whispered, Thank you. Ethan turned. For what? For finding me when I was lost. For seeing me when? No one else did. He reached out, touching her cheek. I didn't find you, Lily. You found yourself. I was just lucky enough to be there when you did. They kissed again under the moonlight. Gentle, unhurried, timeless. When they finally sat down, Lily rested her head on his shoulder. Do you ever think about what's next? He chuckled. Always. But for the first time, I'm not afraid of it. Neither am I, she said softly. Because whatever comes, we'll face it together. The night grew quiet, the stars glittering above them. For a long moment, they just sat there, breathing the peace they had both earned. The sound of the wind through the flowers was like a blessing, gentle and constant. The photographer, packing his equipment nearby, couldn't help but whisper to an assistant, That's the most real wedding I've ever seen. And he was right, because it wasn't built on perfection, but on imperfection made beautiful. Two souls who had been shattered by life had learned how to fit the pieces together, not to erase the cracks, but to let the light shine through them. As the final candle flickered, Ethan looked at Lily and said quietly, From the day I saw you, I knew you weren't just a woman. You were a second chance. She smiled, her voice trembling. And you were the proof that love doesn't save us. It joins us on the journey of saving ourselves. They stood, hand in hand, walking toward the archway, now covered with petals blown by the wind. Behind them, the flowers glowed under the moonlight, each one a witness to everything they had survived. And as they stepped out of the garden, into the rest of their lives, Lily whispered with a smile, This time, I'm not waiting for a miracle. I've become one. The price of peace. The morning after the wedding, sunlight streamed through the open curtains of a small seaside cottage. The sound of waves filled the air, calm and rhythmic. Lily lay awake, her head resting on Ethan's shoulder, listening to the gentle breath of peace she had longed for all her life. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was running from her past. She was simply living. Ethan stirred beside her. Good morning, Mrs. Ward, he whispered with a sleepy smile. She laughed softly. I'll need a while to get used to that. They spent the morning walking along the beach, barefoot in the sand, the ocean breeze wrapping around them like an old friend. It felt like a world away from the chaos of city life. No reporters, no cameras, no judgments, just them. This, Lily said, closing her eyes, this is what happiness feels like. Ethan nodded. And it's free, but peace never comes without its price. That afternoon, as they sat at a small cafe overlooking the water. Ethan received a phone call. His face changed as he listened, his smile fading. "What is it?" Lily asked quietly. He ended the call and looked at her with a sigh. "There's a problem with one of my company's projects. A merger I didn't approve has gone public. If it's not handled quickly, it could damage the foundation's funding." Lily frowned. "So, we go back?" Ethan hesitated. "We just got here, but—" She placed her hand over his. "Then we'll face it together. Peace isn't about running from problems. It's about standing still while the world shakes." He looked at her, admiring the strength in her calm voice. "You always know what to say." They returned to the city the next morning. The world they had escaped waited with open claws. News outlets were already spinning stories. Investor Ethan Ward faces corporate turmoil. Second Bloom Foundation funding under threat. The headlines were ruthless. Lily entered his office and found chaos. Assistants rushing, phones ringing, screens flashing with red numbers. Ethan stood at the center, calm but firm. "Pull the reports," he ordered. "Find out who authorized this deal." Within hours, they discovered the culprit, a senior partner, who had secretly tried to use Ethan's company name to gain personal profit. The betrayal ran deep. It wasn't just about money. It was about trust. When the man was brought in, Ethan's voice was quiet but sharp. "Do you realize what you've risked?" The man lowered his eyes. "I thought I could handle it. I didn't mean to." "You used my name," Ethan interrupted. "And you jeopardized the foundation that feeds hundreds of families. This isn't just business, it's responsibility." Lily watched in silence. There was no anger in Ethan's tone, only disappointment. When the man left, she stepped closer. "You could have fired him in anger." "I almost did," Ethan admitted. "But people make mistakes. I'd rather teach him the cost than add to his ruin." Lily nodded. "That's what makes you different." By evening, Ethan and Lily held a press conference. Reporters crowded the hall, throwing questions like arrows. Ethan stood tall, answering with calm honesty. "The problem has been resolved. Our mission remains the same, integrity above profit. That's what my wife and I stand for." At the word wife, the crowd buzzed. Cameras flashed. Lily smiled gently beside him, her presence grounding him. When it was her turn to speak, she said, "This foundation was born from pain, but it lives because of purpose. We are not afraid of storms. We grew in them." The applause was genuine, not for their wealth, but for their courage. As the reporters dispersed, Ethan looked at her and said, "You just saved us again." She laughed softly. "We saved each other." That night, they returned home exhausted. The city lights sparkled outside their apartment window. "You know," Ethan said, leaning on the balcony rail, "there was a time when I thought peace meant silence. But I think peace is actually knowing how to breathe, even in the noise." Lily smiled, wrapping her arms around him. "Then we're rich in peace." He kissed her forehead. "Richer than any fortune." Over the next few weeks, the company stabilized, the foundation grew stronger, and Second Bloom became an international symbol of recovery. They traveled to other countries, helping women build small businesses, teaching lessons about courage and money. Everywhere they went, people asked about their story, and Lily always said the same thing: "We're proof that life gives back what you dare to rebuild." Yet, despite their success, they never forgot where they came from. On the anniversary of their wedding, they returned to the old church, the same one where Lily had once been abandoned. This time, it was empty, quiet. Lily stood in the aisle, touching the wooden benches. "I used to think this place ruined me," she whispered. Ethan stood behind her, holding her hand. "Maybe it did. But then you used the ruins to build a palace. She smiled, tears shining in her eyes. Palace of Peace. He nodded, the most valuable kind. As they left the church, the sun set behind them, casting long golden light across the floor, the same light that had once illuminated her pain, now blessed her freedom. Outside, Ethan turned to her. You ever wonder what your life would have been like if Thomas hadn't left? Lily shook her head. No, because then I never would have met you, and I never would have met myself. He smiled softly. You know, that might be the most expensive lesson we ever learned. She laughed. And worth every tear. They walked down the old stone steps, hand in hand, as the church bells rang softly in the distance. It wasn't a wedding song this time. It was a song of peace, of closure, of everything they had survived. As they reached their car, Ethan opened the door for her. Ready to go home? Lily looked at the horizon one last time and said, I already am. The legacy of Second Bloom. Years passed, and the world changed around them. But Lily and Ethan's story continued to bloom in ways neither had imagined. Second Bloom had grown from a small flower shop into a global movement, touching thousands of lives. The foundation now operated in several countries, supporting women in building businesses, education, and independence. Wherever they went, people greeted Lily with gratitude, not as a celebrity, but as a beacon of strength. Yet despite all the success, Lily remained grounded. She still visited her first shop every morning. The bell above the door rang softly as she stepped in, greeted by the familiar scent of roses and jasmine. Good morning, old friend, she whispered to the space that had once been her refuge. On the counter sat the same money tree Ethan had given her years ago. It had grown tall, green, and strong, just like her. One morning, as she arranged flowers, a young woman entered timidly. She looked exhausted, her clothes simple, her eyes heavy with worry. Miss Bloom? She asked quietly. I read about you online. I don't know what to do with my life. My fiancé left me last week, and I feel like everything's over. Lily looked at her and smiled gently. I used to feel the same way. Sit down, dear. The girl hesitated. But I don't have money to buy anything. This shop sells more than flowers, Lily said softly. It gives hope for free. She handed the girl a small white rose. You're not broken. You're just between blooms. Tears filled the girl's eyes. How did you get through it? Lily smiled. I stopped asking why it happened and started asking what it was trying to teach me. They talked for hours. Before leaving, the girl hugged her tightly. Thank you. You don't know what this means? As the door closed, Lily felt warmth spread through her heart. Ethan had once told her that true wealth is measured by how many people breathe easier because of you, and now she understood that better than ever. That evening, she walked home through the city streets. The lights sparkled, people laughed, and somewhere in the distance, a musician played a soft tune on a violin. It reminded her of how far she had come, from the bride who cried in the rain to the woman who inspired others to stand tall. At home, Ethan was cooking dinner. He turned and smiled as she entered. How was the shop today? Beautiful, she said, kissing his cheek. Someone came in who reminded me of myself. He nodded knowingly. And you reminded her of what she could become. They sat at the table, eating together quietly. There was no need for grand words. Their silence was full of meaning. After dinner, they stepped onto the balcony, looking out over the city. The skyline glowed softly beneath the night sky. You ever think we've done enough? Ethan asked. Lily thought for a moment. Enough for the world? Maybe not, but enough to make peace with our past? Yes. He smiled. And that's enough for me. Years later, when their hair had turned silver and the foundation had been passed down to younger hands, The world still spoke their names with love. Documentaries were made about them, the couple who taught the world to bloom again. But for them, legacy was never about fame. It was about impact. On their 50th anniversary, they returned to the same beach where they had spent their honeymoon. The sea was calm, the sky painted gold by the setting sun. Ethan held her hand as they walked slowly along the shore. "Remember what I told you that morning?" he asked. "That piece is free?" Lily laughed softly. "And I said I'd never forget." He smiled. "Well, it's still true. And you, my love, are the richest person I've ever known." She looked at him, her eyes warm. "Because of you?" He shook his head. "Because you never stopped growing." They sat on a rock, watching the horizon as waves kissed the sand. The years had given them lines on their faces, but not in their hearts. "Do you ever miss the old days?" Ethan asked. Lily smiled. "Sometimes. But I think the beauty of life is that every ending gives us a chance to start again." He nodded. "Our story began with a broken promise. It ends with keeping one." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "And it's still blooming." The sun dipped lower, painting the sea with hues of orange and red. The world seemed to hold its breath. Lily closed her eyes, feeling the wind brush her face. In that moment, she realized that everything she had ever lost had led her to everything she truly needed. As the light faded, Ethan whispered, "You know what I think heaven looks like?" She smiled, eyes still closed. "What?" A quiet evening, the person you love beside you, and nothing left to prove." Lily opened her eyes and whispered, "Then we're already there." Years later, when the story of Lily Bloom and Ethan Ward was told to new generations, it wasn't remembered for riches or success. It was remembered for love that healed, for courage that rebuilt, and for faith that turned pain into purpose. Every flower in every second bloom shop carried their spirit, a reminder that no heartbreak is final, and no soul is too broken to rise again. And somewhere, in a quiet corner of that very first shop, the old money tree still stood tall, strong and full of life. Beneath it, a small plaque read, "From tears to triumph, may every soul remember that broken roots can still grow beautiful things." And that was the true legacy of Second Bloom.